Now, some intercity drivers in Accra are calling for dual carriage on Ghana's major highways. They say the narrow nature of these roads could be blamed for the carnage we see and record every year. They are worried that regardless safety measures they adhere to, some drivers sometimes veer off their lanes, endangering the lives of other road users in the process. They are of the firm conviction when the highways become dual carriage, accidents will be reduced.
Some have described it as a bloody Friday. Sometime last week, two intercity buses were involved in an accident, and about more than 50 people actually died in that accident. We also heard of another one that same day in the central region. About 10 people died in that accident. Today we are here at a VIP bus terminal. We know this place is very busy all the time. We're here to speak to the people who really matter when it comes to conveying you from Accra or from one destination to the other. We came here some minutes ago, and a lot of things that we heard has to do with dual carriageway. You're saying you should dualize our roads because they say that sometimes it's really dangerous on some of the stretch that they use.
In fact, it is the number one issue that are on the lips of the drivers, because we have single carriageways, and then the number of vehicles in the country is increasing by the day. When you apply, say, the Central Corridor route, hitherto you could do Accra Kumasi in, say, 4 hours, but now you are doing over 6 hours on the basis of the congestion on the way. With Accra Kumasi Highway, yes, one would have thought that when we are able to do the dual carriageway from, say, Nsawam, you realize from Achimota New Plan, you get a dual carriageway up to Nsawam Junction, then there is a new road up to Signboard, from Kwaf Kro to Apedwan Kwanta. The other carriageway, now we can see it is being done, but then we go by the single carriageway. Between Apedwan Kwanta and Bunsu Junction, it's a single carriageway, though a brand new route. And then from Bunsu Junction to Nkoko, that is also a single carriageway. Then there's a short dual carriage between Nkoko New Road to Asuna. Then it's okay. Between Asuna and then Ejoso, there's also just a single carriageway.
What we are learning now is that because these are just because these roads, some of the roads that you've mentioned are not dual carriageway, there's a lot of congestion on the stretch. Sometimes stress sets in, for some of the, drivers.
Certainly, we hear of head-on collision bringing about. Exactly. In 3 years ago, February, there was an accident on Kintampo Highway involving a high occupancy coach. It was a head-on collision. We suffered 53 persons dying. In the current issue that we talk about, this accident is a head-on collision. So when we have a dual carriageway and then we avoid the use of the single carriageway, you are not likely to have a head-on collision coming about. Then we can limit the issue about drivers having to rest and undergo training and then conforming to the rules on the highway. So certainly we have come to a situation where we can safely say that single carriageways are outdated. No developed or under a developing country would want to use a single carriageway in the 21st century.
Another thing that we've heard is how some of these drivers who go long distances sometimes get tired. Are there any interventions to ensure that, okay, if a driver is tired, there's another driver who's going to help him? Are there anything like that in place?
Yes, certainly. Any driver who travels beyond Kumasi to the 3 northern regions and the upper parts of the Brahafo regions, we employ 2 drivers. Okay. One driver has to assist the other in order for them to get there safely, and then there are rest stops on the way that the driver stops. So, for instance, from here to Tamale, the driver will stop at Lindador and stop at Kintampo. Though they have 2 drivers, there are 2 stops that the driver has to take some time off and then stretch. Okay.
We've been joined by Deputy Transport Minister Daniel Titus Glover via phone and Executive Director of the Bureau of Public Safety, Nanaya Akwada, via Skype. And I'll start with Mr. Akwada. We've heard from the drivers, they have concerns, but let's focus on the recommendations by the interministerial committee set up by the President. Are these recommendations exhaustive enough? We talk about converting the Road Safety Commission into an authority, a request for additional funding of 6.5 million cedis, deployment of traffic cameras, removal of disabled vehicles, and additional requests for an amount of 1 billion for road agencies to clear the backlog of road signs, road line markings, etc. Are these recommendations exhaustive enough?
Well, let me say good morning to your viewers. I think that we can safely group the recommendations into administrative and operational. But considering the urgency of the state that we are in now, if we have not observed it, many years ago, but we have now, then it's important that we reorganize these recommendations, break them down into smaller action points, categorize them into immediate, short-term, and long-term measures. See, last year we indicated that road accidents or road crashes is the number one public safety issue in this country. It is taking more lives than every other public safety and crime issue that we are looking at. So in the wake of this incident, if you throw out these recommendations, which we know that came out as far back as April of last year, and you are now giving us status reports, telling us what you intend to do, is an offense. It offends the sensibilities of the It offends the senses, and it does not assuage the pain of family who have lost their victims. So what we will recall or ask the government to do is to break these recommendations down into smaller parts and tell us what is being done. For instance, we all know since time immemorial that we need the National Road Safety Commission to become an authority so that their decisions and recommendations can have far-reaching consequence or impact on other stakeholders. This is not new. You don't put this thing out the morning after about 55 lives have been lost. You don't put this out the morning after you have buried 35 of your own citizens that you can't even identify. When you do these things, you offend the sensibilities of people, and people don't trust you. People think you are just putting things out because you have to put things out. We want to know the 6.5 million that was advanced, the 300 million advanced to the National Road Safety Commission. What have they done with it? What is the outcome? We want to know that what are the immediate steps you intend to take? Are we going to see some change on commercial high occupancy buses within the next week or two? Are we going to see some change as in installing speed governors on these buses? What are your plans, the long term, to rising, the transit routes? I'm talking Accra, Kumasi, Paga. You have two main transit routes in Ghana. Then Elubo to Accra. What are your plans?
Mr. Akwada,
What are the things we need to do?
We've been told by the Information Ministry that with regards to the road signs, road markings, traffic signal lights, and crash barriers on the national road network being taken care of, works are currently happening in various parts of the country. That's what we are being told by the Information Ministry.
My dear. So, sometimes some of these rhetorics we need to put to the Information Ministry.
And definitely we will do that.
Rolling this, go and look at Accra Tema Motorway. Accra is the gateway to Ghana. The only express lane in Ghana is not marked. It has no reflectors. And when the day after over 70 of your citizens have lost their lives, you come and tell us that it's in progress. In progress where? Where? If the only express lane in Ghana that anybody at all is permitted to drive 100 kilometers per hour on it is not marked, where else have you gone to?
Mr. Akwada, there are concerns.
They must be sincere. They must be sincere with us.
There are many who believe that, yes, government has a role to play in this in terms of the roads, road signs, traffic lights, street lights. But there are others who are also concerned about private transport operators and the type of vehicles that they, use on our roads, the conditions of these vehicles, especially vehicles that ply long distances.
Well, I'll tell you what, those concerns will always be there. If you go to the West, where they are most advanced, they have their concerns. What they have done is to think out of the box. If you travel outside, the dual carriage lanes we are talking about, all were not done by government. They are not done in the West because they are fanciful or they are nice, but they have economic implications, they have safety and security implications, and they are development matters of necessity. They are development matters of necessity. What stops government going into a PPP agreement with private operators to dualize the roads, probably toll it, and maybe hand over government after many years or some years of operations? We have done that vehicle inspection department, where now we have private operators who are now inspecting the vehicles, giving you a report for the state issues you a roadworthy certificate. Why can we not expand it? Why can we not ensure that this is working as it ought to work? So there are teething matters in this area which can all be tackled simultaneously. We don't need to come out a night after we've lost so many lives and be throwing around these recommendations, which have been in the chest of government for almost a year. Since last year, April, how many citizens have the police council done? What have been their decision on the issues of speed difference and so on and so forth? These are the hard questions we need to put Mr. Gakan.
Mr. Akwada, we are told that some of these accidents are caused by human errors like sleeping or tired drivers, vehicles that are not roadworthy, or some form of distraction, human errors playing into this. What would you like to tell transport owners who sometimes, in some cases, would put their worst vehicles on these long stretches of journeys, like from Accra to Tamale? Sometimes you look at the condition of the bus and you're wondering, why is this bus doing such a long distance? You look at one driver driving for 12 hours, sometimes just resting for 15 minutes. What would you like to tell them also?
Thank you. At this stage, we cannot say we want to appeal to transport operators. That would be an error. It would be an error. We cannot appeal to them. We have road traffic regulations 2012. In Regulation 125, it talks about continuing driver education. Subsection 4 of that regulation, it indicates that if a driver cannot prove that in a year he has not undertaken at least one road safety class, his license, commercial driver's license, should not be renewed. The laws are there to govern or regulate these operators and drivers. We are not implementing the law. In Regulation 125, Sub-Regulation 1. It talks about operators, commercial bus operators, that they must put their drivers through training annually. We are not enforcing this. If there are laws that we are not enforcing, we cannot be appealing to people. If appealing them, we wouldn't have drafted laws. So the state law enforcement agency must step up and do what they are mandated to do. Research has shown that 90% of all road crashes stems out of driver error. So we must apply ourselves to it and enforce the bit of the law on continuing education. We must apply ourselves to it and enforce disciplinary laws on drivers or motorists who violate such laws. We can't be appealing to them at this time. If your family member perished in that accident, I can't sit here and be appealing to them and it will give you assurance. Those words will not give assurance. We need to implement the regimes that we have put in place to govern and check some of these things that are happening on our roads.
Ms. Akwada, finally, we are told, or we are aware, that every year we lose about 2,000 people on our roads, many more injured. It's such a huge number, and we have appealed, we have spoken about, educating the drivers, road users, pedestrians. We even wanted to have a toll levy. There were discussions. It's been put on hold. What should we do? Because this doesn't seem to be ending. And like you mentioned, many people are losing their lives. It's heartbreaking sitting here having to report that these numbers of people are dying on our roads every other day. What should we do as citizens? What should we be looking at doing to end this once and for all, beyond just relying on government?
Thank you. We have indicated that safety is a shared responsibility. Much as it's important, we look at government to do what it has to do to sanitize the streets. We as citizens also have a role to play. We must be considerate on the roads. We must be careful on the roads. We must speak up on roads. We must be considerate, be careful, and speak up when we have to. We can't leave our destinies, the lives of commercial drivers who obviously are on the roads primarily for profit. We must continuously speak up when we find ourselves in such situations. And this morning, we tweeted that statistics available to the Bureau of Public Safety indicate that most of these gory accidents that have occurred in the country, at least for last year, that claimed a lot of lives, happened in the early hours of the day between 12 midnight and 6 a.m. So if it were possible, whatever factors that were causing it, National Road Safety Commission, DVLA, it would be important to do research into that to determine that. But for now, if I were traveling, I would rather set out 6 a.m. than to set out after 10 p.m., which obviously will make me victim of a night traveler. Also, over time, most of the incidents have happened early hours of the morning. And so if we can avoid that, we can also reduce the risk of getting involved in such accidents that claim so many lives.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Naya Akwada is Executive Director of the Bureau of Public Safety. Great advice there, ending our conversation with him. And if you're a public transport owner, please, for those of you who let your vehicles travel to the northern part of the country only at 3 p.m., this is some information that you may want to pick up. But we were scheduled to speak to Deputy Minister of Transport, Daniel Titus Glover, but he tells us he's engaged in another official assignment. We'll bring you that conversation later.